When Lord of the Rings came out in 1954, Yale Professor Harold Bloom read the novel, and he was not impressed, describing it as inflated, overwritten, tendentious, and moralistic in the extreme. He further concluded that whether Tolkien is an author for the coming century seems to me open to some doubt. Harold Bloom was not alone in his criticism. Many academics were scathing in their reviews of Lord of the Rings. But given how popular Lord of the Rings has become to the general public, why is this? Why do academics hate Tolkien's Lord of the Rings? Hi there, welcome to the Elven Review, where we take a detailed look at some of the intriguing questions of great fantasy literature. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings is one of the most popular pieces of fiction of all time. It can therefore be a surprise to learn that academics have frequently dismissed and rejected Tolkien as a bad writer. Following Harold Bloom's withering critique, the writer and literary critic Edmund Wilson was also angered by Lord of the Rings, and described it as juvenile trash, and said that Tolkien had little skill at narrative. Likewise, feminist scholar Catherine R. Stimson published a book-length critique on Tolkien, saying behind the moral structure is a regressive, emotional pattern, for Tolkien is irritatingly, blandly, traditionally masculine. When the British bookshop Waterstones named The Lord of the Rings the best novel of the 20th century, following a poll in which 25,000 people voted, it prompted feminist critic Germaine Greer to offer the lament, "It has been my nightmare that Tolkien would turn out to be the most influential writer of the century." Hostility from the literary establishment to Lord of the Rings has been consistent and pervasive through the 20th century and into the 21st century. So what's going on? Are academics just being contrary? Well, they certainly wouldn't be the first people to dislike something just because it was popular, but clues about the way they are thinking can be found in their choice of words, frequently berating Tolkien for being moralistic, traditional, and regressive. They see Tolkien's work as harking back to an earlier form of storytelling that they feel they themselves have moved on from. To understand this, we have to look at the philosophy that guides many of these academics. One way to do this is to look at the text that they do like. A great example, and one that sharply contrasts with Tolkien, is Samuel Beckett's play Waiting for Godot, which was voted the best modern play in English in a survey of theatre and arts professionals that was conducted by the British National Theatre. Harold Bloom, who so vilified Tolkien, was a huge admirer of Beckett, and Beckett continues to be a favourite of English literature university courses, while Tolkien is frequently absent from reading lists. Waiting for Godot is a bleak minimalist comedy about two depressed tramps who discuss various subjects while waiting 2 acts for another character called Godot, who repeatedly sends word of his arrival but never actually appears. It has been described, somewhat amusingly and aptly, as a play in which nothing happens, twice. The play is so minimalist that it invites all sorts of interpretations, but it is frequently seen to exemplify the post-war literary theme of existential crisis and the impression of life in a meaningless and godless universe. Its tragicomic setting echoes the work of existentialist writers and philosophers like Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre. They explored the view that human beings are incapable of finding meaning in the universe and must face the absurdity of existence through a lack of intrinsic purpose. This, of course, strongly contrasts with The Lord of the Rings, a redemptive tale with an underlying moral structure, where characters are driven by purpose and the entire fabric of reality is underpinned by meaning. Tolkien's tales are tales of a universe guided by divine providence, whereas existentialist writers explored a universe without it. Tolkien and Beckett both present the reader with lots of thoughtful prose to consider, but it was Beckett that hit the mood of the critics. The literary establishment loved Beckett. Harold Bloom praised the playwright, saying, "Probably the most powerful living writer is Samuel Beckett. He's certainly the most authentic." In fact, the literary establishment was so impressed with Beckett that they awarded him the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1969. Tolkien was nominated for the award in 1961 after being put forward by his friend C.S. Lewis, but he was rejected by the jury, who claimed that Tolkien has not in any way measured up to storytelling of the highest quality. In retrospect, this seems strange, given how important and influential the story has become to people all around the world, and also highlights the disconnect between the literary elite and the general public. This isn't to say that post-war academics don't like traditional literature. They do, but they generally feel that traditional romantic tales belong with writers from those earlier periods. Writers they do like, such as Beckett, tend to explore what modern academics feel are newer, more modern themes and styles. The 20th century saw a great change in philosophy and critical thinking for academics. The influence of Christian ethics waned, and alternative philosophies like Marxism and existentialism sprang up. The influential Marxist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre described the post-war perspective of existentialism, saying, "The existentialist finds it extremely embarrassing that God does not exist, for there disappears with him all possibility of finding values in an intelligible heaven." Conversely, when we look at Tolkien, the underlying essence of his stories is divine guidance and design. Gandalf alludes to this when speaking to Frodo and suggests that a higher power was at work when Bilbo found the ring, saying, "There was something else at work, beyond any design of the ringmaker. I can put it no plainer than by saying that Bilbo was meant to find the ring, and not by its maker, in which case you were meant to have it, and that may be an encouraging thought." This is echoed later by Elrond at the Council of Elrond when he says, "I think that this task is appointed for you, Frodo, and that if you do not find a way, no one will." He also alludes to providence in the convening of the council itself. "What shall we do with the ring, the least of rings, the trifle that Sauron fancies? That is the doom we must deem, that is the purpose for which you are called hither. Called, I say, though I have not called you to me, strangers from distant lands. You have come and are here met, in this very nick of time, by chance as it may seem, yet it is not so. Believe rather that it is so ordered that we who sit here, and none others, must now find counsel for the peril of the world." This is very different to the fate, so to speak, of the characters in Waiting for Godot, Estragon and Vladimir. They seem to be adrift in a universe without order. Godot never turns up to guide them or save them. Lord of the Rings is a traditional heroic tale. There is an Arthurian quality to characters like Aragorn, Éomer and Faramir, who embody the Christian knightly values of medieval literature, while landscapes like the Shire evoke ideals of the pastoral lifestyle that existed before Britain was industrialized. These are themes often expressed in the works of earlier writers such as the Romantic poets of the early 19th century and Victorian writers of heroic tales and verse. Lord of the Rings and all the tales of Middle-earth have a tremendous epic quality that evokes the great tales of antiquity. Taking inspiration from this style of writing inevitably went against the grain for modern academics. You can see this when they use words like regressive, moralistic and traditional to criticize Tolkien. They see his writings as out of place and outdated by not conforming to the popular trends of modernism and later postmodernism, where traditional morals and values are deconstructed and critiqued. Tolkien's crime was to be inspired by North European myths and legends, and a wish to explore and reimagine them, and to be unrepentant in doing so. Critics, who angrily called his works trash and aggressive, were in a way reacting against Tolkien's own rejection of the modern world. He had the audacity to write a redemptive and romantic tale set in a Christian-inspired world, at a time when the literary establishment was obsessed with existential dilemmas, written by atheists and set in worlds without salvation. Tolkien may not have hit the mood of many academics, but he clearly hit the mood of the general public. Readers all around the world were eager to explore Middle-earth and follow the tales of hobbits, elves and dwarves. While critics disliked Tolkien's traditional values and traditional storytelling, the general public welcomed it and embraced it wholeheartedly. Tolkien provides readers with a wonderful antidote to the stresses of modern life by providing people with a world they can temporarily escape to. It is actually the unique way Tolkien created his story, and the new form in which he explored ideas drawn from earlier myths, that captivates readers so much. For some reason, many academics have failed to acknowledge this new aspect to literature that Tolkien gave us and which inspired an entire genre of fantasy writers to follow. While academics want literature to reflect the philosophies and trends that they find fashionable, many readers simply want to enjoy a great story. And a story that takes inspiration from the great storytelling traditions of the past is able to do that in the hands of a great storyteller like J.R.R. Tolkien. Having said all that, I should also acknowledge that academic criticism of Tolkien has not been universally negative, and there are academics who have defended Tolkien, and institutions that promote the study of his texts. It'll be interesting to see where Tolkien is eventually placed in the literary canon by future scholars of literature, when this period of time is studied more objectively. What do you think of Tolkien's treatment by academics? Let me know in the comments below, and please hit the subscribe button to see similar videos. Thank you for watching.